Internet friends, hello. The reason I posted the last video on what is wrong with this picture was to impress on people that listen to me that nothing is hidden. Or let me say, nothing that matters is actually hidden. We have the ability to understand and decipher and decode, especially the reptiles who are actively engaged in obfuscating the journey that we're all on. And people in the past have identified this, for me anyway, quite clearly. There are many people that have indicated the essence of our journey. This, of course, is a reference to existence and life within existence. And I know that these are words that might just they're just words, but it's very important when I use the word, for example, eternity or existence, life. These are very fundamental notions that evoke a core of being. And I just want to say that I'm following up on my video here, somewhat inspired by another YouTuber that I really like, Hank McGurk, who has his ambient glow radio broadcasts, and he deciphers reality and the situation that we're in. And he acknowledges my influence on him, which I really appreciate. I mean, he is so complimentary, and we have a relationship. We actually haven't personally talked, but we have a relationship. Isn't that interesting? It's kind of like this reality in the sense of YouTube and the internet actually working on a level that's meaningful, not just arbitrary images and sounds that have no reference to meaningful, and meaningful being something, here's another word, meaningful, something that connects us to each other, makes something, that's a meaning. There's a meaning behind experiences that we may not understand entirely, but they resonate. And I highly recommend you people that listen to me go to his channel and check him out. I'm hoping to do an exchange, an actual verbal exchange, because it's a person that I met through the Fukushima fight. He came onto my channel probably maybe 2.5 years ago, 2014, maybe in that time frame, when a few of us got really hammered by certain individuals on YouTube that have, some of them have disappeared now. Obviously, they were operatives. They were trying to scuttle and discourage people from pursuing the understanding that this catastrophe at Fukushima has completely fucked everything up now as far as life is concerned. Existence will continue. Existence is existence, but life is actually a rather peculiar aspect within existence. So my thoughts today, following up on what's wrong with this picture, is that nothing can really be hidden. And Hank referred to this, what I said, we all know. You know. And we choose through elaborate systems, through rituals and belief systems, to obfuscate things that we know. And I'm going to talk about, usually what I talk about when I make my comments on my channel, this may be just like a ramble. I usually ramble, and sometimes it doesn't really make a lot of sense to people. And I apologize for that, because it sort of formulates in my own mind, and it's not something, think of it as when you're looking at a painting, it's not really that clear all the time. We have to extract something from an experience that may not be like, you know, getting hit in the face and you feel it. And sometimes you have that sense you're being hit, but you don't know what all that is about. So some of my reflections, I'm excusing myself a little bit here maybe, but I'll just sort of follow this thought, and I'm going to follow up on what's wrong with this picture. And the idea that we all know, I'm convinced of this because I know. And what I know is that from this picture, the moonwalk, I've done an entire series of paintings that I started in 2008 that I called the Apostle Astronauts. I painted 12 apostles. I had a show that expressed, and the 50th anniversary, I wasn't even thinking about this, the 50th anniversary of the so-called moon landing, which is a bunch of hooey. There is no moon the way it's being told, the story that is told to us. There is a moon, and the earth is looks and is a certain way, and we have Newton, and we have quantum physics, and we have all these brilliant Einstein minds and Hawking minds telling us the nature of our existence, when we all know. But allow the white coats to have their place, I suppose. And I don't have a great deal of faith in the white coats. I have to tell you, I don't have a lot of faith in the white coats because history has shown they get it wrong. They get it wrong all the time. It kind of comes out. I'm like thalidomide. Anybody that's still, and by the way, I just found out that thalidomide is still being prescribed. Don't think for pregnant women, but it's still being prescribed. And it's a lethal drug if you've seen the results on thalidomide. And then you transition into, let's say, the nuclear technology, which has absolutely no value to any living being in existence. No living being. I'd like you to tell me which living being, other than the ones on the paycheck, have any value from this technology. The white coats, they figured it out, right? How to split the atom. It's called fission, nuclear fission. It's not what we understand to be fusion, and even I'm not convinced about the whole scenario of fission, fusion, what the hell is going on. There is grave doubt, but I know about what's going on, but I know something is really wrong with all of this. And I prefer, rather than to dissect just the wrong part of it and give you information about how it's wrong, to reveal and to reflect on what it means for me to be alive right now. What does it mean to be alive? What is the essence of our significance? Each person at this moment in time. What is it that we reinforce and understand about each other at this time? That's art. That's basically art. I'm not a fucking decorator. I don't want to make the oligarchs feel good about their mucky muck, like all the museums and all the traditions of art propagation and culture and civilization, which basically removes this element of interaction with each other in spite of the oligarchs. There are still remnants of this. When I go into a museum and I look at a Goya or I look at a Rembrandt, or even colleagues of mine that are producing work that is focused and centered in conscience. I'll get to this again. I always get to this point. So what I'm thinking about today, and the video that I did yesterday, this second video, 2 days in a row, on what's wrong with this picture. And of course, in that image, if you go to that, it's only a minute video. The moon is rising, or rather the earth is rising on the moon's horizon as Neil Armstrong is snapping a picture of Buzz Aldrin. Now, obviously, this is a phony and a fake picture, and I'm not even going to go into the idea of CGI, these computer-generated images and videos and all the stuff. You can go to Jeranism, and you can go to the NASA channel, this Math Powerland, who has understood and dissected. This Math Powerland guy is kind of interesting to me as well because he's a painter. And he says he painted the images of the earth the way NASA is using the images of the Earth to propagate a story, a narrative that fits, I would say, thousands of years of history, right? There are alterations among the white coats to adjust their false narratives to fit our society, who we believe to be right now, people carrying iPhones and cell towers and high technology, 5G, all the microwaves that are being propagated through the airwaves, through the whatever that is, again, punishing our biology. That's a bottom line, isn't it? It seems to be that all of biology, especially at this point in time, since I would say 1938, which was Strassmann-Hahn discovering, I think that Fermi discovered it before that, but didn't know what the hell he was dealing with, or Marie Curie, she sort of had no clue what she was dealing with. She died of cancer. They all died of cancer from radiation. But in 38, Strassmann-Hahn definitively understood that you can, in some kind of a process, physical process, create incredible amounts of toxic elements that emerge from a reaction, a chemical reaction. It's called nuclear fission. Anyway, my point today is a reinforcement of the fact that you actually know. It's a matter of choice. And I'm not saying we don't learn. I'm talking about a fundamental knowing. And when we get down to the basics, which is our existence as living beings, there are certain things that allow us to rise through this, within this experience, to accomplish something that is of true value. And this is something that each person feels, because it can easily be hijacked by a lot of different things. I mean, the whole notion of public relations and commercials, propagations. It's like getting people on board to love sports, and they don't do it themselves, but they get very excited about some guy who knows how to put a ball into a hoop. They get so excited, but they've never done it themselves. This is what I'm talking about. To be excited about something and never to have done it yourself is a rather peculiar, weird aberration to our experience, right? To be enthusiastic for someone being able to put a ball through a hoop and get $30 million a year for being able to do that. So there is a lot of subterfuge in order to derail us from this fundamental knowledge that we all have about ourselves. I'm talking about ourselves. And then consequently about what's going on around us. And it's not always intellectual, understood intellectually, but we have a connection to the things that are actually important to us, but we choose not to adopt them into our life. And I would say my thought on this is that it's not like a cold turkey thing where you eliminate everything that doesn't have any meaning. I mean, there is something, the concept of beauty, which I'd like to go into actually in some of my videos going forward. But there are aspects of things that give us sustenance and strength, which may not be, as I explain, entirely wholesome. Like if you get enthusiastic about something that you see happening out there, and you cheer, you root for your team. I'm not saying stop doing that, but do it with an understanding of what actually really matters. So this idea of the moon rising on, or the earth, the earth rising in this image is totally fabricated, because as I explained, that the moon, according to the white coats, faces the earth continuously, has done so for millions of years for some reason. For some reason, this orb, this disk that we see, has never changed its position within a few degrees, 1, 2, 3 degrees of a tilt. It has always faced the earth, what is known to be the light side of the moon. Who's that record Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah, that was a weird bunch. I know people really like those guys. They creep me out. That music creeps me out. Anyway, this thing, this image, again, is like a snub by the people that undermine, obfuscate, laugh behind our backs at knowing that we know, but we go along with it. That's what that was about. We all go along with it. And some, people that commented made references to the earth being too small or that there were no stars. And all this is true. There are so many anomalies in the explanations that, or the anomalies are within all the explanations they give us. It doesn't make any sense. The earth being supposedly a ball spinning in space in a vacuum, and it miraculously keeps all the atmosphere within it. Usually when you expose an atmosphere into a vacuum, it gets sucked into the vacuum. It's like empty spaces want to be filled. So, and gravity and all this stuff. So all that, and people who are really dedicated, decent people that I like, many of them are still attached to this narrative in order for them to be able to function in the day. How about just giving it up and living with the uncertainty? I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't have any proof of what it is, but I'm not going to capitulate to an explanation. This is something I have a great deal of problem with. People who actually have no explanation to the anomalies, but continue to adhere to it. There's something wrong here. You have to begin to shift into another perception of yourself. You can't keep these two opposing views that are so diametrically opposed when you understand that this is not possible, and still to maintain a conviction and even base your philosophy and life on this. I much prefer to live in the uncertainty than live in the conviction of a lie. So here's the essence of what I wanted to say today. This is in reference, and I want to say again, I was inspired by Hank's. He appreciates my presentations, and he inspired me because I think he represents for me maybe a kind of a younger me in a different version, completely different version. But what I got inspired about was that I see the spirit that binds us is built and prevails in what I refer to as conscience, not the intellect. This is a big mistake. People make this mistake all the time. I see this on YouTube, and I discard most of the YouTube, even though I gain some valuable explanations and insights. Let's say, for example, about the nature of our reality in terms of the physical world that we exist in. Is it a ball? Is it a plane? Is it sitting on elephants and turtles? It's like people that have input, I take as valuable, but if it rests on the notion of intellect, and I'm not a Luddite. I've been accused of being a Luddite. I'm not. All I said was, if I could invoke the sacred into day-to-day life, I much prefer to experience it in a mud hut wearing wood shoes than with cell phones and iPads and Steve fucking Jobs giving us the meaning of the universe through his technology. That's all I'm saying. So this notion that I find to be quite it's an obstruction that the intellect formulates our perception of meaning. And this is totally erroneous, because if you've ever stood in front of a magnificent work of art or listened to a piece of music, and I don't care your taste, whatever, if it's blues or jazz or even hip hop, although that gets a bit thin for me. Yeah, I guess I'm an older guy. Hip hop, oh, you're not hip. But it could happen in hip hop too. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying that if you ever experience something that is truly giving And I say giving in the sense that you're able to receive, because there's no sense in giving if you can't receive. It's sort of like a plug and a receptacle. Like there's no point in having a plug to plug in your electricity if there's no receptacle. You see, it goes hand in hand. There's no point in giving if there's no receptor. You need to have a receptor. So people that spout and like they make sense on some level, but they're not able to plug in for whatever reason. I don't know what that is. And I have people that I go to that make me feel that my own spirit lives in them, or their spirit lives in me. And this is basically the understanding that I've come to through this YouTube medium, that the idea of ally, and this is something I imagine a person like McGurk, or I speak with a few other people that are, they're not on YouTube anymore, but they feel strength through an alliance. And what is that alliance? The alliance is part of us knowing. We tell each other that we really know. It doesn't mean that we know whether the earth is a certain way, but we're really content with living with the anxiety of not knowing the specifics, but we really know. This ability to bear frustration is very thin nowadays. People have very low tolerance levels in certain ways. I mean, people have great tolerance levels in accepting the white coat's explanations of everything, but when it comes to things that matter, there is no tolerance. So if I said to you that your intellect is obstructing your ability to enrich your spirit, you'll resist because, well, it's everything, the brain. It's like brainiacs. It's the Hawkins guys. They don't even need bodies. And this Hawkins guy was weird. I made a painting about him in a spacesuit where this guy was diagnosed in his early 20s to have the Lou Gehrig's or Parkinson's, the neuro disease that he had. And no one ever survived this disease for, I think, longer than, maybe tops 10 years, if that, 15. Most are within a 2 to 5 year range. It's finished. It's when you contract this disease, you're done. But he apparently lasted for 50 years with this. Like, another anomaly. It's like propagated. This is a civilization that disguises itself behind brain, intellect, phony unicorn stories that we absorb. We're taught, or we're told, Hans Christian Andersen and Brothers Grimm in my history, and then it sets us up to accept all these unicorn stories that they give us about quantum mechanics. Oh yeah, hang your hat on quantum mechanics. A particle goes through a slit and it's both the wave and it's both the particle. And Einstein, the fuzzy-haired guy, tells us why that's so. I mean, it has no a posteriori, which is the experience we have of something. Instead, we go the a priori, which is a belief system. We introduce the two concepts and we are completely, totally a priori in our perception of reality. Okay, I'll finish this with the idea that spirit prevails in conscience. And conscience is obviously, I'm speaking to you. I'm using my mind. I'm using my thoughts, words. These are levels of communication. I don't know how whales and dolphins and monkeys and how they communicate. It doesn't matter to me. They're no less significant than me in the sense that they have an existence within life that is meaningful, purposeful, important. The smallest creature, the smallest living creature, ask any white coat to even produce a fucking dust particle. They haven't got a clue. How does a dust particle, you talk about the beginnings of the universe with your big bangs. You can't even produce a fucking dust particle in your labs. And then you pound your chest on having like the knowledge of everything. Oh, we just have to dot, like in 1850, they said this. We know everything. We just have to, yeah, we know everything. Yeah, they all knew. But we all know how to undermine and create enough subterfuge to have people spinning, spinning around us, whichever way we want. Anyway, these people said that we just have to dot a few I's and cross a few T's in order to just settle the meaning of the universe. And then came Heisenberg and the people like Maxwell. Well, Maxwell disproved. Heisenberg kind of continued the whole notion through quantum mechanics, this fucking fantasy. It's like supersymmetries, and I even did a bunch of paintings based on this because I was so inspired by people like David Bohm. I still like David Bohm, actually. I think he was a very integral person, but didn't really have a clue because well, let me put it this way. He understood something about the nature of our reality, but couldn't bring that conscience part into it, meaning that the connection he really felt with another person. See, this is what binds us. It's conscience that binds us. It's not intellect, it's not ideas, it's not philosophies, it's not the Enlightenment or the Renaissance or medieval art or anything. It's conscience that binds people, that starts to make sense on a fundamental level. Everything begins to make sense, especially when you're living with your ally, when you have people on board, when you have people on your side. And this is the exercise on YouTube. This is how I started, not started, but evolved in YouTube to find allies. And they're very few. I have to say there are very few. And even among those allies, there are fundamental differences because, for me, because conscience is not in play. They may have the rightness in terms of ideas and thoughts. There is a rightness in the thinking, but when it comes to the fundamental action, who we are the actions. We are not what we think, we are what we do. And there's always more said than done. No, what is that? After all is said and done, more is said than done. This idea is functional. I find this to be very functional among most people. So how do we counter that? Is to be on the right side of things in our actions. And I was thinking today, a final note on an artist that I really like, Stanley Spencer. He did a series of paintings of Jesus in the wilderness. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not attached to the idea of Jesus other than as a representative of this phenomenal ability that we have within us. Number one, Jesus, quite often in the stories, has this amazing ability to be frustrated about things. Like people around him are like fucking done. They're dense, they're ignorant, they're imbeciles. And he still has this in the story anyway, he still has this ability to interact and feel like this is something he can work with. I have a great difficulty with imbeciles in the sense, not mind intelligence, just this active conscience part not being operative. This is what I find to have a tremendous amount of difficulty, and Jesus didn't seem to have that. But Stanley Spencer, an artist, a British artist, he belonged to he was isolated to some extent, but he had interaction with colleagues. I think he was part of a school. I forget, they had a name for it. He lived up in the middle north of England, and he did a series of paintings of Jesus in the wilderness, which are just absolutely gorgeous. I love these paintings. And he was a very religious in his paintings. I think as a person, he didn't live the religion the way it is expressed in the paintings, but what comes through is this incredibly deep sense of spirit, to be on the right side of things in some way. He's a phenomenal artist. I highly recommend Stanley Spencer. And his images of Jesus in the wilderness, we know, of course, that Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights and was the evil one came and tried to seduce him and all that, and he resisted. These are all allegories and stories that we can attach explanations to, but the fundamental notion for me is that this person was always on the right side of things. That's what the story is for me. And the divinity the idea of godness, obviously is injected by the religious white coats who try to take away from us what we know by telling us something that only they know. Hey, yeah, you go to heaven. What the hell is heaven? Wow, this has been a long one, over 30 minutes. But a follow-up to the idea of what's wrong with this picture, and find inspiration among people, allies. We need to find allies, whichever way that's possible, whether it's the 7-Eleven, we find allies, people that vibrate within this notion of conscience. It's something that you can go back on my videos. I explain it a little more in detail, but it's again part of a mystery. I think that we're endowed with this ability to be on the right side. Like I said in my previous videos, I said biblically speaking, it's the knowledge of the tree of good and evil is this notion of conscience. And it's not a set of rules passed down like the 10 Commandments, all this Moses shit. This has something to do with something innate within all of us. This is early on in Genesis. In the early chapters and verses of Genesis, you come across, well, there are two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is in the center of the garden. And the tree of life is east of Eden, which is also interesting. If you're going to go into all this, this is complex, but beautiful, beautiful. Cain, in the land of Nod, east of Eden, the land of all possible possibilities. Cain is a fabulous character, totally misrepresented, the same way Satan is totally misrepresented. Satan has nothing to do with the evil one trying to fuck us up. Well, you know, maybe there's I'll just sort of, I'll try and end it here. Satan is a Shin Tav Naun, which is, or is it, no, I'm not sure if it's Tav. There's the central letter is the concept of the female. It's the 9. I think it's the 9. And it blocks, now this has nothing to do with women being the evil ones. No, it just means it's an energy that is blocked from two things attempting to meet. That's all it means. That's all it means in what I've understood through Kabbalistic, I studied Kabbalah somewhat. So when we attach ourselves mentally to things, we can easily get derailed. And I will change my mind about anything if I'm shown to be wrong. This is part of living with a certain frustration of maybe the specifics are not clear to us. So I will change my mind. But there's certain fundamentals that are rooted in my nature that I've understood, and I'm a late bloomer. I've come late to this. I've not understood this until probably maybe, well, it's connected to Fukushima, I think. Probably 2011, 12 is when this epiphany kind of hit me. I put things together in that way, and my work changed quite drastically as well. So I guess I did this as a follow-up and a longer video for people who have the patience to listen through this. And the spirit prevails in conscience. That's what I want to tell you. I've understood this. I have no doubt about this whatsoever. That as long as you're on the right side of things, you'll also find your allies. I find my allies. Maybe it's only one person, 2 people, 5 people, but the power in people that actually have activated this part in themselves is phenomenal, And I think the results, I guess I was thinking about this. Okay, here's another thing I was thinking. Why does nothing ever change? With all the information, the facts that we know about WMDs, we have all this information. We know how the oligarchs treat even their own and their children. We know all this. Why don't things change, us knowing this? And my conclusion is that we stay within the mind, the thought, the intellect, the brain. We don't connect the conscience. This is why things never change, because it doesn't matter how many facts are on your plate. It'll never change anything unless we activate this part. Yeah, so anyway, I'll end it here. 34.5 minutes. All my best to you.